It's December 27th, 2011. I'm driving a car full of family and friends up to a ski resort. What was a day that was supposed to be fun-filled, I was feeling anger. A family member had relapsed. He just got out of rehab and he relapsed again. So I looked at him in the rearview mirror, made eye contact, and I said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you hurting everybody who cares about you?" He put on his headphones and then turned out to the foggy window and stared into the frozen landscape. When we got to the ski resort, we were lining up to get on the same chairlift together, even though we had separated. I thought this would be a great chance for us to have that conversation. But then I noticed he scooted back in line, forcing the people behind him to move. I ended up riding that chairlift alone. I thought, that's okay, I can talk to him later. Little did I know, that would be the last time we had a chance to talk. That loss sent me searching for answers, ways to influence and reach people better. I got a doctorate trying to study the science of influence and influential leadership. I became an executive coach working with top executives at top firms and high-growth entrepreneurs. I even teach a class at a prestigious business school, BYU, right here, on influence and persuasion. But the thing that had the biggest impact on me wasn't what I learned in a classroom or a boardroom. Right after that event, I started volunteering at a suicide hotline. And the very first thing they taught us to say on day one of training is never start with why. Instead, they said start with what. In fact, the very first question was, what's going on? If you think back to that van ride, I said, why are you doing this? I was putting him on trial, and why then becomes a weapon. It doesn't take somebody else to do this. You do this to yourself. When you say, why is this happening to me? The same effects. The brain registers this as pain. You go into fight or flight, and anxiety rises. It doesn't take somebody else for you to feel the same type of effect. Instead, the research says, say what? What is happening to me? Feel the difference. Why is this happening to me? What is happening to me? Why represents a hammer sometimes. What represents a flashlight? The FBI had to learn this the hard way, the same way I did. 35 years ago, they found themselves in a negotiation with a group of people in Waco, Texas, who had a very strong why. It was day 51 of the negotiation, the standoff. And they're having this conversation, and I want you to watch what was said in that final transcript. I pulled out of the final transcript what they're trying to say. Again, this is day 51. The group leader is saying one thing, the FBI negotiator is saying another. The last phrase he said before he hung up was, "You gotta understand what I can control." Hung up. The FBI forced their way into the compound, and what they hoped would be a surrender turned into a self-inflicted fire. 70 people died, including 20 children. It made the FBI re-examine everything they believed about influence. And one thing profound they learned that people don't actually know what they want. So in negotiations, they think when people have high demands, when people have strong beliefs and they make demands, they must know what they want. But after examining all their research, they said they actually don't. And they realized you can't influence what you don't understand. 3 years later, they find themselves in the same situation in Montana called the Montana Freemen. Same group, they're on a compound, strong why. It's day 86 of the negotiation. FBI is not worried. They're patient. I want you to look at the final transcript of that conversation. FBI negotiator, I understand. And then he restates what they believe. And that guy said, that's right. That's right actually unlocks a chemical reaction in your brain that gets you open to new ideas. In fact, lead FBI negotiator Chris Voss says if you can get someone to say that's right, it's more powerful than yes. And remember, you can't influence what you don't understand. Okay, don't want to reveal too much too quickly. And sometimes it takes these moments for us to figure out what really matters. I was reading a book, 1984, by George Orwell. famous book. And there's a phrase in there that still sticks in my mind. And he says, perhaps one would rather be understood more than loved. And I've been thinking about for a long time, and I actually believe that's true. Now, this is an extreme example. So I'm going to give you an everyday one because you're going to spend 40% of your waking hours in moments of influence. It may not look like it, but you're going to be in situations where you're stuck in a situation almost like a standoff. I was coaching a leader who just got promoted. And she said, hey, there's a team member that's been coming in late. I said, okay. And she said, he also wanted my promotion. He wanted this job. It's a sign of disrespect. I feel like it's a sign of disrespect. I said, okay. She said, I'm going to address it. I said, great. Could you mind if I sit in? She said, sure. He comes down and sits in. And I noticed right away, she says, hey, I want to bring something up. I noticed you're coming in late. And he looks at her and goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not late. And I want you to think, what would you do? What would you say? She knows he's been coming in late. She said 10 minutes for the last 3 meetings. What would you say? I bet I can predict there's 2 roads that you're looking at. You're a fork in the road. One road, I'm going to challenge him. I'm going to confront. You're a new leader. Or the other one is this worth it? Am I going to fight? Right? But you don't think of the third road. And that's curiosity, trying to understand. So she looks at me and I give her a nod. And she says, what's your definition of late? What's your definition? She led in with what? What's your definition of late? And what he said was, well, the meeting doesn't really kick off for 15 minutes anyway. Like we get set up, there's a lot of small talking, people come and go. It just doesn't really seem, so I don't feel like I'm being late. I'm efficient, you know that. And she said, I understand. And then she said, I really value efficiency, just like you do. And she says, if we were to start the meeting on time and kick off with work-related items, would you come early? He said, absolutely. And she says, you're an engineer, I know that. And she says, I see that we all work together. We're like parts that work together like a machine. And when we talk and have small talk, we're actually being efficient because, as you know, in machinery, we have oil, we have friction, so we use oil. And she said, small talk is actually being efficient. But you're right, I could do better at getting things set up better. I'll do that, you're right. But I can see that you want things to be efficient, and it's a waste of time if we just sit there. He said, that's right. And when she finally moved to this, would you be willing to come on time? Because efficiency is actually trust. That's how we're efficient as a team. That's influence. Now we're talking about a powerful tool that works between a few people. Could it work between you and 1,000 people? Could you influence 1,000 people at one time? Could you influence 1,000,000 people at one time? What about 1,000,000 more people, even more than 1,000,000, who think you suck? Could you do it? At one time, influence them. In 2009, there was a company on the brink of bankruptcy. Most companies would rebrand, they would fire their marketing department, and they would lean into their why. But instead, they asked what? In fact, the very first question they asked their customers, we're going to try to understand you. The very first question was, what's your honest opinion of our pizza? That's what they said. And what they heard back was, your pizza crust tastes like cardboard, your sauce is like ketchup, and microwave pizza is superior to you. That's what they were told. In fact, on a national taste test, they ranked last and tied with Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. So here, they gathered all this feedback, and then they did the unthinkable. They broadcasted it. They shared it with everybody. They said, you said we suck. We admit it. Right? They even shared videos of chefs doing the unspeakable to food in the kitchen. What do you think happened as a result? If you were to bet at this time what stocks would be the best stocks in the stock market from 2009 to now, I bet you're going to guess Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, and you would have done great. but I doubt you would have guessed Domino's Pizza. And if you look back, it's not even close. And they're the first company ever in the stock market history to not invent a new product line. Apple had to invent the iPhone when they were on the brink of bankruptcy. All they did was lean into the what? They still sell pizza. Most companies say they love their customers. Some say they obsess over them. Few make their customers feel understood. And remember, people would rather feel understood than feel loved. And you can't influence anything you don't understand. If I can go back to that chairlift ride and have that one I didn't have, I would have sat next to him and said, what's going on? I would have tried to understand his perspective. Because I would understand that he actually doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know or understand himself. And you can't influence something you don't understand. But I can tell you this, even though I said the FBI had to learn that people don't know what they want, and that's true, what often looks like conviction is confusion, everybody wants the same thing. We all want to feel understood, even more than loved. Understanding changes everything. It can even save a company on the verge of bankruptcy, and it might just save a life. Thank you. Dry mouth. I needed something to drink.